Good morning, and it is a fine Sunday morning indeed. I just jogged 4 miles, and now I got my cup of coffee going. And more importantly, I will teach you a thing or two about genetics, specifically pedigrees, this morning, like some kind of weirdo over the internet on YouTube. So, first things first, in the previous few examples, coincidentally, the variables we had, whether it was brown hair or brown eyes or even a baldness, coincidentally, these variables were all B. Okay, the letter B. But I wanted to point out just real clearly here that when you assign a variable to a trait, it's not always going to be B. Okay, it's kind of like when you have a term paper for a class. You go to your Google Drive and you're going to save it. You would call it biology paper or genetics paper. You come up with a title that makes sense. And of course, with genetic variables, it's pretty much the same concept. So, for example, you see at the top where it says mid-digital hair. Alrighty. If someone is homozygous dominant, you see where I have the two capital M's, heterozygous, and of course, homozygous recessive. And maybe you're even wondering what mid-digital hair is. So let's see if I can, on my hand, if you look between your knuckle and your fingernails, okay? If you have at least one hair, and I have one, if you have at least one hair on at least one of your 10 digits or fingers, that counts as mid-digital hair. So if you have at least one hair, or if you are some kind of Hobbit Bigfoot person, and you have millions of little hairs, it's still the same gene for mid-digital hair. Moving onward just a tad, earlobes. Okay, so see, I didn't use the variable B here. It makes sense to call it E. So the dominant trait is for people who have unattached or floppy earlobes, if you will. Some people have attached earlobes. So about 1 out of 4 people, more or less, have that attached earlobe gene. So you can see the same variables, big E, big E, big E, little e, and of course the homozygous recessive, little e, little e. Tongue rollers. I think most of you all are familiar with that term, if you can roll your tongue or not. So it's the same deal. Most of you can, but there are some of you sitting there watching this who perhaps cannot. So it's probably about 25% of the population, or 1 out of 4. Now, something else I'm going to point out quickly, if you notice how I did the M's here and how I did the T here, if the lowercase letter is similar looking to a capital letter, trust me, boys, get in the habit of making it cursive. Make it cursive, because when you're in a hurry, you're taking a test, you're working out problems, and you're running out of time, those lowercase letters, if you're doing them in regular print, start to look like capital letters. So if you do it in cursive, you avoid those sorts of mistakes. Just like, for example, suppose I gave you a problem about a fictional X gene or S gene, and I said the parent is heterozygous. You see how you can tell the difference easier there than just scribbling a lowercase s or x or what have you? Okay? Those are 2 good examples of lowercase letters that look a lot like the capital. So, moving on. I told you I want to talk about pedigrees, and I know, you've heard this word before, like the brand of dog food, right? So pedigree in the animal world is a chart, and we'll talk about how to put it together. It's this chart where you can find out if that animal is a purebred for a particular breed. Okay, like for, again, horses and dogs are good examples. Do you have a purebred Labrador Retriever, for example? Okay, so that's where you've heard the term, but obviously this applies for people. Okay, are you what is the probability or the percentage, in other words, that you carry a particular trait? And it could be traits that we've just talked about. For example, hair color, earlobes, mid-digital hair, and so forth and so on. So here we go. I put together a quick and dirty little nifty pedigree. Let's see, there you go, for my family. Okay, so I'm going to start off with my parents. Okay, and the great Gregor Mendel would have referred to this as the P generation. So that stands for parents. So there's dad, there's mom, and both of them have little bug. Both of them have dark brown hair. Now, do I know if they are carrying blonde? No, I do not know. And truthfully, the only way we'll ever know is, if a kid, and that's the same for you guys, you don't know if you're carrying a recessive gene until you have a kid that has that gene that's expressed as part of their phenotype. So that's why I left the second part of the pair blank. So I put B on one parent and B on the other. So now we move on to the F1 generation. Let's see if y'all can see that. These are the kids. So this one right here, and I went in order from age, so I'm the baby, all right? This is my brother. That's my brother. This one right here is my sister. And there is yours truly, the great Mr. B. All right, whatever. So my brother married a lovely little lady. They're both dark brown hair. Okay, so again, we don't know if they're carriers or not. We look at their kids. Both their kids have dark brown hair, so it's kind of kind of boring in that sense. Not the kids, but the the pedigree. Okay. Then we look at my sister, also brown hair, but she marries a blonde dude. And check this out. Why am I able to fill in the entire genotype for my brother-in-law? Why can I do that? Because he's blonde. Does that make sense? If he was carrying a brown hair gene, he would not be blonde. So they end up they have one daughter, my lovely niece, and she has blonde hair. That's so we can fill in both. See, unlike my other nephew and niece, we're able to fill in her entire genotype because obviously she's blonde. Then we get to me, and I'm kind of like my brother. I'm boring. There's my lovely wife, the greatest woman, most beautiful woman, kindest woman in the entire world. But as far as hair color, brown haired, right? Same with me. Her hair is darker than mine, but it's like I said with mid-digital hair. It doesn't matter if it's dark or medium brown or what have you. It's still the same gene for brown hair. I've got my 3 little kids. You know them. I've talked about them. There's Adele, brown haired. There's Tara, brown haired. There's Leo, brown haired. I have no idea what their genotypes are. Oh well. But this was the exciting one. My blonde-haired niece. That means my sister, theoretically, is a carrier for blonde. So let's run through this. We can actually determine my sister's genotype. Okay? So we're going to make believe with 2 little Punnett squares if my sister is big B, little b. Is she heterozygous or is she, homozygous dominant? So take a look at the phenotypes here. If my sister was homozygous dominant, all the kids would be heterozygous. That's the math, boys. That's how it works. All the kids would be heterozygous. And obviously that's not the case because I got that lovely blonde niece. And she's blonde. She's blonde, all right? So this has to be my sister's genotype. So now we can go back with 100% certainty. Look at that. We know for a fact my sister is heterozygous. So where does that blonde gene come from? Obviously, she had to have inherited it from one of my parents. And on both sides of my family, there are some, blonde cousins and whatnot. So the gene's floating around out there. But that's about it. In class, we could talk about red hair gene, which is a really neat little Spanish gene. And even like green eyes, which is another one of those super recessive Spanish genes. But you kind of get the gist. Sometimes these things just pop around. And like the saying goes, sometimes they skip a generation. In reality, especially if you look at my blonde example here, they don't literally skip a generation. I know that's a saying you've heard. They might skip several generations. But whether it's blonde or red or green eyes, you don't know when they're going to pop up. But sometimes they do. And that's about it. So until next time, have a great Sunday morning.